There's a version of you that never got to exist, and you killed it. Not with one decision, but with 1,000 small lies you told yourself about timing and readiness and being practical. Every time you said someday when you meant never, that version of you died a little more. Every time you called fear wisdom and comfort responsibility, you buried your actual calling under another layer of acceptable excuses. And here's what nobody wants to admit you knew. You've always known. There's a quiet voice inside you that's been screaming the truth while you've been making noise about all the reasons why now isn't the right time. That voice isn't going away. It's going to follow you all the way to your grave, asking one question you won't be able to answer. Why didn't you at least try to become who you actually were? You know what the tragedy of life is? It's not that we die. Death comes to everyone. The real tragedy is that most people never truly live because they spend their entire existence lying to the most important person they'll ever know themselves. Right now, somebody is sitting in a job they hate, telling themselves they're being practical. Somebody else is in a relationship that died years ago, convincing themselves it's going to get better. Another person has a gift locked inside them that could change their community. But they keep saying, I'm not ready yet, or maybe next year, or I don't have what it takes. And the saddest part, they actually believe their own lies. The mirror in your bathroom doesn't lie. When you stand in front of it, it shows you exactly what's there. But somehow, we've mastered the art of looking at our lives through a distorted lens, seeing what we want to see instead of what actually is. We've become experts at crafting narratives that make us feel comfortable while our potential withers away inside us, unexpressed and unfulfilled. Let me tell you something that might shake you up a bit. The most dangerous person you will ever encounter in your lifetime is not your enemy. It's not the person who doesn't believe in you. It's not even the person who actively tries to stop you. The most dangerous person you'll ever meet is the one staring back at you in the mirror, who nods in agreement every time you make an excuse for why you haven't become who you were born to be. I remember hearing about a young man named Ibrahim, brilliant architect. When this man put pen to paper, he could design buildings that made you feel something just looking at the sketches. He had that rare combination of technical skill and artistic vision. His professor said he was one of the most talented students they'd ever taught. When he graduated, everyone expected him to set the world on fire. But 3 years after starting his own practice, Ibrahim lost 3 major contracts in a row. Not small projects, these were the kind of opportunities that launched careers. And you know what he did? He started building a case. He collected evidence. The economy is terrible right now, he told his wife. These clients don't appreciate quality design, he explained to his friends. The market is saturated with architects willing to undercut everyone on price. He posted on social media. He had an answer for everything, a reason for every failure, and all of his reasons pointed away from himself. His wife, a woman named Zara, watched this for months. She saw how her husband's confidence was crumbling despite all his explanations. She noticed how he'd come home from client meetings looking defeated. Then spend the evening constructing elaborate justifications for why he didn't get the project. One evening, after he'd lost another bid, she sat him down. Ibrahim, she said quietly, can I tell you what I see? He looked at her, already defensive. What? I see a man with incredible talent, but I also see a man who can't communicate that talent to save his life. You go into these meetings and you get so excited about your designs that you forget the client isn't an architect. You use technical terms they don't understand. You talk about concepts without showing them how it solves their specific problem. And when they don't immediately grasp your vision, you get frustrated and they can feel it. Ibrahim's face went red. That's not true. These people just don't stop, Zara interrupted. Please stop. You're doing it right now. You're lying to yourself right now. And I love you too much to watch you destroy your career with these lies. He wanted to argue. He wanted to defend himself. But something in her eyes made him pause. And in that pause, something cracked open inside him. Because deep down, in a place he'd been avoiding, he knew she was right. He'd known it all along. He'd watched other architects with less talent win projects because they knew how to connect with clients. He'd seen it happen over and over. But admitting it meant admitting he wasn't perfect. It meant acknowledging that his failures were at least partially his own fault, and that was terrifying. That night, Ibrahim couldn't sleep. He lay in bed replaying every client meeting in his mind. And this time he watched himself honestly. He saw how he interrupted clients when they were trying to explain what they wanted. He remembered the moments when confusion crossed their faces and he'd plowed ahead anyway, assuming they'd catch up. He recalled the thinly veiled impatience in his own voice when they asked basic questions. The next morning, he made a decision. He called a speaking coach. He joined a Toastmasters group. He started recording himself and watching the playback, as painful as that was. He practiced explaining his designs to his neighbor who knew nothing about architecture, and he asked for honest feedback. It was humbling, it was uncomfortable, but it was real. 6 months later, Ibrahim won a contract for a small community center. Not his dream project, but a start. And this time, he won it. Because he'd listened more than he talked. He'd asked questions. He translated his vision into language the client could understand. A year after that, his practice was thriving. Not because the economy had improved or clients had suddenly started appreciating quality design, but because he'd stopped lying to himself about his weaknesses and started doing something about them. Here's what most people don't understand. Self-deception doesn't just hold you back. It doesn't just slow you down. It literally transforms you into someone you were never meant to be. Every time you lie to yourself about why you're not moving forward, you're choosing comfort over growth. You're choosing a familiar prison over an unfamiliar freedom. And day by day, year by year, you become a person who is skilled at one thing above all else, explaining why you never became who you could have been. Now here's where it gets interesting. We don't just accidentally fall into self-deception. We build it. We construct it carefully, brick by brick, until we've created an entire fortress of lies that feels safer than the truth. And we become so skilled at this construction that we don't even recognize we're doing it anymore. Think about how sophisticated we are at this. When something goes wrong in our lives, our minds immediately go to work building a case for why it's not our responsibility. We gather evidence, we find patterns, we create narratives that cast us as the victim or the person who tried their best against impossible odds. And the fascinating thing is, we're not doing this consciously to fool other people. We're doing it to fool ourselves. There's a profound difference between a reason and an excuse, but most people can't tell them apart anymore. A reason is an honest explanation that leads to action. An excuse is a comfortable lie that leads to stagnation, a reason says. This happened because of these factors, and here's what I need to change. An excuse says, this happened because of these factors, and there's nothing I can do about it. One opens doors, the other builds walls. You want to know how to tell if you're giving yourself reasons or excuses. Listen to where your sentences end. If your explanation for why something didn't work ends with you as powerless, it's an excuse. If it ends with you identifying what you can control and change, it's a reason. Most people have trained themselves to always end a sentence at the excuse and never get to the reason. Let me tell you about Katherine. High-powered executive at a major corporation, brilliant woman, climbed the ladder fast. By the time she was 35, she was pulling in a 6-figure salary, managing a team of 40 people, traveling internationally for business. Everyone who knew her thought she had it all figured out. But Katherine had a secret conversation she kept having with herself. When she was in college, she'd loved painting. Not as a hobby, as a calling. She'd see colors and compositions everywhere. She'd wake up with visions of canvases she wanted to create. Her art professor told her she had something rare, something that couldn't be taught. But Katherine was practical. She was responsible. She came from a family that struggled financially, and she'd watched her parents stress about money her entire childhood. So she told herself a story. I'll take the corporate job for a few years, save money, get stable, and then I'll pursue art. That's what she said at 23. Then at 25, she told herself, once I get this promotion and the raise that comes with it, I'll have the security to explore painting. At 30, it was. After I finish paying off my student loans. At 35, once I buy a house. At 40, when I hit my retirement savings goal. At 45, after the kids are through college. And here's the thing, Katherine believed every single version of this story. She wasn't deliberately lying to herself. She genuinely thought she was being smart, strategic, responsible. She looked at friends who pursued creative careers and struggled financially, and she told herself she'd made the right choice. She was being an adult. She was being realistic. Then came her retirement party, 65 years old, 30 plus years with the company, gold watch, speeches about her contributions, cake, champagne, everyone congratulating her on a successful career. And Katherine went home to her paid-off house, looked at her substantial retirement account, and felt absolutely nothing. The next morning, she woke up with this thought: now I can finally paint. She walked into what was supposed to become her art studio, a room she'd been planning in her mind for decades. She stood there for 2 hours, and nothing came. No visions, no compositions, no overwhelming urge to create. She realized with horror that she'd waited so long. She'd forgotten what her passion even felt like. It was like trying to remember a language you spoke as a child but haven't used in 40 years. Katherine fell into a depression that terrified her family. This accomplished woman who'd commanded boardrooms couldn't get out of bed, and when she finally went to a therapist, the truth came tumbling out. She'd spent her entire life negotiating with her calling. She'd treated her purpose like it was a patient creditor who would wait indefinitely for payment. And now the bill had come due, and she had nothing to offer. But here's what saved Katherine. She stopped lying. She sat with the brutal truth that she'd betrayed herself for 42 years. She admitted that every story she'd told herself about someday was a lie designed to make her feel better about choosing safety over calling. And once she stopped defending those lies, something shifted. She started small. She took a basic painting class at the community college, sitting next to people a third of her age. It was humbling. Her skills were rusty, and her vision was buried under decades of neglect. But she showed up week after week, and slowly something began to wake up inside her. Within a year, Katherine wasn't creating the art she might have created if she'd never abandoned it. But she'd found something else. She started teaching art to seniors, other people who'd spent their lives telling themselves later. She created a program at the community center for retirees who wanted to reconnect with abandoned dreams. She wrote a book about the cost of postponing your purpose. And she told everyone who would listen, don't do what I did. Don't trade your today for a tomorrow that might never come. Your gifts are not patient. They don't sit quietly in storage. Perfectly preserved, waiting for you to get around to them. They're living things. They atrophy. They fade. They scream for expression. And when you keep silencing them with lies about timing and readiness and practicality, you're not postponing your purpose. You're killing it slowly. So what happens when you finally stop? What happens when you stop negotiating with your own mediocrity? When you stop crafting comfortable narratives and start facing the raw, unfiltered truth about where you are versus where you're supposed to be? I'll tell you what happens. Everything changes. Not all at once. Not always in the way you expect, but it changes. See, most people think honesty with yourself means acknowledging your flaws and feeling bad about them. That's not honesty. That's just self-criticism wearing a mask. Real honesty with yourself is surgical. It's precise. It requires you to look at your life without the filter of justification or shame and simply see what is, not what you wish it was, not what it could be if circumstances were different. What it actually is right now, today. This kind of honesty is terrifying because it strips away every defense mechanism you've built. You can't blame your parents anymore. You can't blame your education or lack of it. You can't blame the economy, your spouse, your boss, your circumstances, your age, or your resources. When you're radically honest with yourself, you have to acknowledge the one variable in your life that you actually control you. Your choices, your actions, your commitment or lack of it. But here's what nobody tells you about this kind of honesty. It's not just destructive. It's not just about tearing down the lies. It's actually the most liberating thing you'll ever experience. Because once you stop spending energy maintaining false narratives about yourself, all that energy becomes available for actually changing your reality. There was a man named Jorge, worked at an automotive parts factory for 26 years. Good job, union benefits, steady paycheck. He provided for his family, never missed a day of work. He was respected by his co-workers. By every conventional measure, Jorge was doing fine. But Jorge had something inside him that nobody at that factory knew about. He was a musician, not someone who played music as a hobby, a musician in his soul. When Jorge was 16, he could pick up almost any instrument and make it sing. Guitar, piano, drums, bass, it didn't matter. He had this natural sense of rhythm and melody that made other musicians stop and listen. His high school music teacher begged him to apply to conservatory, but Jorge's father worked in a factory. His grandfather worked in a factory, and when Jorge graduated, his father got him a job at the same plant where he worked. Music isn't work, his father told him. Music is what you do after work, and Jorge believed him. Or maybe he just didn't have the courage to disagree, so he took the factory job, telling himself it was temporary. I'll play music on the side, he thought. I'll build up some savings, and then I'll see what happens. But factory work is exhausting. Long shifts, physical labor. By the time Jorge got home each day, he was tired. Too tired to practice, too tired to write songs, too tired to even think about music. And as the years passed, he stopped even taking his guitar out of the closet. He got married, had 3 kids, and the guitar sat there gathering dust while he convinced himself he was being responsible, being a good father, being a man. His children grew up never knowing their father played music. They saw him as the factory worker who came home tired every day and fell asleep in front of the television. They loved him, but they didn't know him. Because the real him, the him that came alive with an instrument in his hands, had been locked away for decades behind a lie about responsibility. Then Jorge had a heart attack. He was 44 years old. Not severe enough to kill him, but severe enough to make him think about death for the first time. Lying in that hospital bed with monitors beeping and tubes in his arms. Jorge had a thought that broke him. I'm going to die, and I never actually lived. Not that he never had experiences, not that he never did anything, but that the person he was born to be never got to exist. The music that was supposed to come through him into the world had died inside him, unexpressed. And suddenly, all his reasons for not pursuing music, all those practical, sensible, responsible reasons looked like exactly what they were. Excuses, lies he'd told himself to avoid the risk and uncertainty of becoming who he actually was. When Jorge got out of the hospital, something was different. He stopped lying to himself about what responsibility meant. He realized that the most irresponsible thing he'd ever done was abandon his gift. He'd thought he was protecting his family by working at the factory, but he'd actually been teaching them that dreams die and you just accept it, that you bury who you really are and pretend it's noble. Jorge started teaching music at the community center 3 evenings a week. He didn't quit his job. He still had bills to pay and years until retirement. But he stopped using exhaustion as an excuse. He stopped treating his gift like it was an optional luxury instead of a fundamental part of who he was. And something unexpected happened. His students started winning competitions. Kids who'd never touched an instrument before were playing in recitals within months. Parents would come up to Jorge with tears in their eyes, thanking him for what he'd unlocked in their children. And Jorge realized something profound. His gift was never about him performing on stages. It was about raising up the next generation of musicians. His assignment wasn't to be a famous musician himself. It was to make sure other people didn't make his mistake, didn't bury their gifts under lies about practicality. Within 2 years, Jorge had taught over 100 students. Several had gone on to music school. One had earned a scholarship to a prestigious conservatory. And Jorge understood finally that his years of lying to himself hadn't just hurt him. They delayed a miracle for every student he would have taught if he'd been honest sooner. So now we arrive at the question that matters most. How do you actually live this way? How do you build a life where you're not constantly negotiating with the truth about yourself? Because knowing you've been lying to yourself is one thing. Actually stopping is something else entirely. Living in truth is a daily practice. It's not a destination you arrive at. It's not something you achieve once and then you're done. Every single day. You wake up and you have a choice. Are you going to see yourself clearly today, or are you going to retreat back into comfortable fiction? And the choice you make in that moment sets the trajectory for everything that follows. Here's something most people never consider. What you tolerate in yourself becomes your ceiling, not your floor. Your ceiling, the standards you accept for your own behavior, your own effort, your own integrity, those become the absolute maximum of what you can achieve. You cannot rise above what you're willing to excuse in yourself. If you tolerate laziness in yourself and call it taking it easy, then your ceiling is mediocrity. If you tolerate dishonesty in small things and call it being diplomatic, then your ceiling is superficial relationships. If you tolerate unexpressed gifts and call it being realistic, then your ceiling is a life of quiet desperation. Whatever you're willing to live within yourself becomes the boundary of your existence. And the dangerous part is how gradual this process is. You don't wake up one day and decide to accept mediocrity. You make a small compromise. You let one standard slip. You make one excuse that feels reasonable in the moment. And then tomorrow, that compromised standard becomes your new normal. And the next day, you compromise from there. And before you know it, you're living so far below your actual capacity that you can't even see the top anymore. But it works in reverse too. When you refuse to tolerate lies in yourself, when you hold yourself to a standard of honesty that's uncomfortable, you create upward momentum. Every time you choose truth over comfort, you raise your ceiling. Every time you admit, I was wrong, or I could have done better, or I've been lying to myself about this, you expand the territory of what's possible for your life. Think about accurate self-assessment for a moment. Not self-criticism, not false humility, but accurate assessment. The ability to look at yourself and see both your strengths and your weaknesses without exaggeration in either direction. This is rare. Most people swing between two extremes. Either they inflate their abilities and blame external factors for their failures, or they diminish their gifts and use their weaknesses as an excuse for not trying. But accurate self-assessment says, I'm exceptional at this, mediocre at that, and terrible at this other thing. And all of that is information I can use. It doesn't make you arrogant about your strengths or defeated by your weaknesses. It makes you strategic. It helps you position yourself where your gifts can have maximum impact and your weaknesses matter least. Your future is literally imprisoned in your honesty. Everything you're capable of becoming is locked behind the door of truth about who you are right now. And the key to that door is radical honesty with yourself. Not brutal, not harsh, radical. The kind of honesty that goes to the root of things and refuses to accept surface explanations. When you lie to yourself about why you're not moving forward, you freeze your future in place. Because you can't solve a problem you won't acknowledge. You can't change a pattern you keep justifying. You can't grow past a limitation you keep pretending isn't there. Every lie you tell yourself is a vote for staying exactly where you are. But every truth you face, no matter how uncomfortable, is a vote for becoming someone new. And here's the beautiful part. Those votes compound. Small truths lead to bigger truths. Small changes lead to bigger transformations. The person who starts being honest about small things finds it easier to be honest about bigger things. The person who admits small failures finds it easier to take responsibility for larger ones. This is the compound effect that most people never consider. We think about compound interest in money. We understand that small amounts invested consistently over time become large amounts. But we don't apply this principle to truth. Small lies compound into lives built on fiction. Small truths compound into lives built on solid ground. Every morning, you make deposits into one account or the other. Every time you look at yourself in the mirror, literally or figuratively, you either make a deposit in the truth account or the fiction account. And just like money, what you deposit consistently is what grows. The question is, which account do you want to be wealthy in when you're 65? When you're 70, when you're on your deathbed looking back at your life, you cannot build a meaningful life on a foundation of lies you tell yourself. It doesn't matter how successful you look to other people. It doesn't matter how much money you make or what title you hold or how impressive your resume is. If the foundation is fiction, the whole structure is unstable. It might stand for years. It might even stand for decades, but it will never feel solid. You'll always know somewhere deep inside that you're living in a house built on sand. But when you build your life on truth, when you face yourself honestly every single day and refuse to accept comfortable lies, something miraculous happens. You become unshakable. Not because you're perfect, not because you have no weaknesses or never fail, but because you're not hiding anything from yourself. You're not maintaining false narratives. You're not spending energy defending a version of yourself that doesn't exist. And in that space, in that territory of truth, you finally become free to actually be who you were born to be. Not who you pretend to be. Not who you wish you were. Not who other people think you should be. Who you actually are, with all your gifts expressed, all your potential released, all your purpose fulfilled. Stop lying to yourself. Starting today, starting right now. Your future is waiting for you on the other side of the truth. The hardest truth you'll ever face is this. You already know what you're lying to yourself about. Right now, reading these words. Something inside you is stirring uncomfortably because you know exactly which lie I'm talking about. You know the dream you've been burying. You know the conversation you've been avoiding. You know the change you've been postponing. You've known all along. The question isn't whether you'll ever know the truth. You already do. The question is whether you'll ever stop pretending you don't. Because that's what self-deception really is. Not ignorance, but willful blindness. It's the active choice to look away from what you can see clearly. It's the daily decision to accept a comfortable lie instead of an uncomfortable truth. And here's what happens when you finally stop. You don't just change your circumstances. You change your relationship with yourself. You become someone you can actually trust. Think about that. Most people can't trust themselves. They make promises to themselves they don't keep. They set standards they don't uphold. They declare intentions they don't follow through on. And then they wonder why they feel so lost, so uncertain, so unstable in their own lives. When you stop lying to yourself, you become your own solid ground. You become someone whose word means something even when no one else is listening, especially when no one else is listening, because the promises you make to yourself in the quiet moments are the ones that define who you actually are. Your deathbed is coming. That's not pessimism, that's reality. And when you get there, you won't care about the excuses you made. You won't find comfort in all the practical reasons you gave yourself for playing small. You won't be impressed by how well you explained away your unused potential. You'll only care about one thing. Did you live as yourself? Or did you spend your entire life pretending to be someone safer? The tragedy isn't that you might fail if you try to become who you really are. The tragedy is that you might succeed at becoming who you're not. You might build a perfect life that has nothing to do with your actual purpose. You might achieve every conventional measure of success while the person you were born to be dies quietly inside you, unnoticed by everyone else. So stop. Stop negotiating. Stop postponing. Stop crafting elaborate justifications for why now isn't the time. Now is the only time you have. This moment, right here, is your life. Not someday. Not when conditions are perfect. Not when you feel ready. Now, never lie to yourself again. Not about small things. Not about big things. Not about why you can't or shouldn't or won't. Face yourself with the same clarity you demand from anyone else. Hold yourself to the standard you wish others would reach. Be honest enough with yourself that when your last day comes, you can meet your own eyes in the mirror and know you lived true. That's the only victory that matters. Everything else is just noise.